Hello and welcome to Views on News. I'm Jawad, Tehami, Pakistan's Foreign Affairs spokesperson. Mumtaz Baloch says, let me quote her, India's network of extraterritorial killings and abductions has now gone global, and other countries are also concerned about India's extraterritorial activities, unquote. This comes after startling revelations made by one of the leading and most credible media outlets in the world, Washington Post, regarding India's assassination program, which India executed on at least 6 individuals in Pakistan from 2021 and onwards. The report says, let me quote, India's assassination program marks similarities to the operations of its assassination and assassination attempt in North America. The report also talks about how India's relations with Canada and the United States of America were rocked with allegations and its assassination and assassination attempts in the respective countries. Now, this is not the first time that any of the leading and most credible media outlets have come up with such startling revelations regarding India's assassination campaign worldwide and state sponsorship of terrorism. Earlier we saw Guardian also came up with such revelations. Also, we know earlier back in year 2024, the then Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, Mr. Mohammad Cyrus Sajjad Qazi, made an important presser saying, let me quote, Pakistan has the details of a sophisticated and sinister Indian campaign of extraterritorial and extrajudicial killings inside Pakistan, unquote. There were a number of other important things which were highlighted by Mr. Cyrus Sajjad Qazi in that particular presser. We'll also be talking about that in today's show. Later on in April, we saw Interior Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Mohsin Naqvi, saying all evidence of such killings is pointing towards India. Now, this specific report, a very detailed report by Washington Post, talks of a list of Indian names involved in this particular sinister campaign. Also, how the executions in Pakistan were carried out, how the payments through informal channels with these assassinations were made, and also gives a glimpse into Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Home Minister Amit Shah's attitude towards this particular assassination campaign. All these important aspects of this particular thing are up for discussion in today's show. And will India be ever held accountable for its state sponsorship of terrorism? Is there any role or responsibility that could be shown and played by the international community in this particular regard? To discuss all this, we are honored to be joined in the studio by Mr. Altaf and Wani, Indian affairs expert. Mr. Wani, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you
for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Later on in the show, we'll be joined by some other participants. As they join in, I'll be introducing them. Let's begin with this nature and the scope of this Indian assassination campaign. How do you look at that? What's your understanding?
You see, before Canada exposed the extraterritorial killings of the Sikhs in Canada, and thereafter something happening with the Sikh leader in New York, and these things started coming up that India is involved in extraterritorial this terrorism throughout the globe. And we in Pakistan know the Kulbhushan Yadav when he was arrested and how he was instrumental in destabilizing Pakistan, to aiding and abetting the terrorism in Pakistan at different channels, responsible for lots of sabotage events in Pakistan that we already knew. But the revelations that came by the British newspaper,
The Guardian.
The Guardian story, that was very alarming one. The way how India is mastering this support around, and how they are killing the people in Pakistan and around the globe, all those people who at any point of time have criticized government of India, or they criticize them for their human rights, or they are demanding the self-determination for their people. This they did in about the Sikhs, but in Pakistan we have seen at least at that time 6 such incidents were reported. But We know it's more than 6, it's 22 people who have been killed by the Indian agencies using those channels which you already discussed in your intro, how the money was sent, who were the people who were used for these things. This was the Raj network. Though India firstly denied all this when our Foreign Secretary gave a press briefer on it, how India is involved. He gave a whole nexus of the India, this terror nexus around the globe and also in Pakistan. And our investigators, our agencies had already nabbed many people on this. And they had seen where from the money is coming, how they have used the people of the other nationalities, not the Indian nationalities, but the other nationalities in Pakistan to kill the Pakistani people who are here or to target the Kashmiri freedom fighters in Pakistan. This has all been exposed by our Foreign Secretary at that time. But then India refuted all these allegations at that time. But during the elections, we could see that Indian Prime Minister, when he saw he was losing the election, he then stated it that हमने मारा है, घर में घुस के मारा है. We have gone into their homes and killed them, and we will carry to do it. So did Amit Shah, and earlier even the Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh did the same. So this is why, because India was not held accountable for any of the crimes it did in the past.
I'll come to that particular point, the accountability of India, not being held accountable. So much revelations. Its assassination of Hadi's signature on the Canadian soil, and then assassination attempt on the US soil also. The point that you've already made, the domestic consumption. Now, this particular Washington Post report talks of that particular Guardian report. Let me quote, a day after Guardian published a report on assassinations in Pakistan this year, Modi, without explicitly confirming and any slaying, boasted during a campaign rally of entering India's enemies' homes and killing them. That is exactly what you have said. This thing, and also during an interview, his Home Minister Amit Shah also said that let the agencies do what they are required to do. Now, by looking at these statements, I'm curious to understand the mindset of a person who is leading a country that claims itself to be the largest democracy in the world.
Unfortunately, it has already been, I think it was the Swedish, one of the think tanks, we said India is not a democracy, but India is a theocracy. It is run by this, at this time, so these fundamentalist Hindus, they are running the show of the government. There is no democracy at all, but just to count to democracy, largest democracy. Having said that, I'll tell you one thing. The Narendra Modi's poster in India in these years has been that he wants to portray himself as the sole defender of India. He says that I am the only one who can defend the India inside and outside. He says that I can go into the Pakistan and kill the people in Pakistan. They also at some time claimed to have the incursions in Azad Kashmir and killing the so-called terrorists with them.
You already talked of the election campaign. So this particular narrative didn't sell well with the general public over there in India in the recently held general elections. Am I correct on that?
We were expecting that this time during the elections, Modi will say that we have gone to the moon, we have landed on the southern side of the moon, we have done this, we have done G20, we have done development, all that. But then that did not sell among the people because that was all cosmetic. What then Modi was forced to say?
He turned again towards that very narrative. Even when he turned to that narrative even didn't sell well because the kind of results we saw, they were not very heartening for the BJP's performance overall.
If that narrative was not taken by the Modi could have lost the more seats. And
if he couldn't have turned to that
opposition this time. But he was forced to come to that narrative so that to appease the general public of the India, to those Hindu extremists, that it is the Modi who has defended our nation, who can defend, and who can defend in Canada, who can defend the nation, who can kill the people in Canada, going after them in Canada. He will go after the residents in the United States. He can go anywhere, and he is the man. He has portrayed himself like this.
Is it wise on the part of the Prime Minister of the largest democracy? The largest democracy, I repeat, because
in numbers.
But there have to be values when you're part of the Committee of Nations. You've got a certain
See,
standing in the
unfortunately,
Committee
you
of
see
Nations.
the kind of language, the kind of things what the Modi has been speaking for the last almost now 10, 15 years, the way he has been speaking, the thing for which he is known as the massacre, murderer of the Gujarat, we say the people in Gujarat, what he did in Gujarat, he was known for that. And he has that personality. That is not changing. And unfortunately, the Indian public has to, Indian youth, Indian literate people, they will have to think about it. Where they are taken to the India, the world's largest democracy so-called, and the huge population, if that population turns into such a Marana state wherever they will want to kill the people, they will kill, their agencies will go after the people in any part of the world, then the Indians will have to face themselves with the consequences of this. And then what will be the India's future if this persists in India? So the BJP has I think, created such spaces in the Indian polity, in the Indian public, that now there is a large fragmentation in Indian society, which was not there. So people are thinking about it. What Modi? I was just listening to one of the BJP's leader, Subramaniam Swamy. He said, in Modi, Modi has been sidelined by the China. He could not do anything there, and Modi has not been called by the Trump. Now he is sending the Jai Shankar there to ask the Trump that he should extend an invitation to Modi to come to his ceremony over there. So this kind of thing, already the international community is also looking at it, how the Prime Minister of a larger democracy is behaving, how its government is behaving, how its
Is it
agencies
sufficient
are
just
behaving.
for on the part of the international community just to look and notice and observe what he's up to while he continues to do what he's actually up to? I'll come back to you. Let me bring in another participant, Dr. Jamil Khan, former ambassador, joining us on Skype. Dr. Khan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Dr. Khan, now let me start from that particular important presser by the then Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, Mr. Cyrus Sajjad Qazi, regarding Pakistan having the details of India's extraterritorial, extrajudicial activities, also credible evidence of a sinister and a very sophisticated campaign, Indian assassination campaign on Pakistani soil, breaching Pakistan's sovereignty and also the UN Charter. Then we saw one of the leading and credible media outlets, The Guardian, came up with such startling revelations. Now Washington Post has come. We also saw Pakistan's Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi also coming up with evidence saying that all evidence of such killings is pointed towards India. There is a lot other that is going on the part of Indians. When we talk about their state sponsorship of terrorism, transnational terrorism, particularly on the Canadian soil, in the US, that assassination attempt. There is so much that we can enlist as to India's state sponsorship of terrorism. Despite all that, firstly, I want your understanding how dangerous this particular trend is, and how do you expect India to be treated after India has been involved in such type of acts?
Well, any state which does this transnational terrorism, or for that matter, any aggression towards the other state, and inflict and affect the territorial integrity and the sovereignty, as Justice Trudeau has said it on the floor of the House, that affects the sovereignty of the Canada, because a Canadian has been killed on the Canadian soil. That was Hardeep Singh Nijar. So he has said it in a very clear words, and then followed by his deputy prime minister, who very clearly indicated that the entire plan was in the knowledge, and the instructions came from Amit Singh, and that is again an official statement. So I'm quoting you these official statements, and in addition to that, what you have already mentioned, that the Guardian, that's the Washington Post, and also Al Jazeera had shown a complete documentary on each event in the North America, whether it was Hardeep Singh Nijar, or it was Poonam. assassinated attempt. By the way, it was not only in North America and Pakistan. The Indians have already done it in UK, but they could get away with it because the UK government were not able to really investigate it to its depth, and also they attempted it in the European countries. But basically, if we draw parallel in what Mossad has been doing and the RAW, in fact, had tested its ground in Pakistan by assassinating 20 people in last several years. So after that, they thought, that same model they can apply in the North American countries, that is Canada and the United States. So they tried that, but they didn't know that the Five Eyes were there. And then also there was sufficient evidence. And probably in the recent history, for the first time in any country, on the floor of the House and the Parliament, all the evidence were presented. And also in a speech of Prime Minister on the floor of the House, they have said given all the evidence alleging Indian involvement
How
in the
unprecedented
assassination
this one
of a
is.
Canadian.
That shows how
Yeah,
unprecedented
yeah.
this one is. Quite a detailed recap of what India's been up to. While you stay with us, let me bring in another participant into the show, Brigadier retired Rashid Wali Janjua, Senior Analyst. Brigadier Janjua, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. In the studio, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. Wani, and at the same time, Dr. Jamil Khan is joining us on Skype also. So let me cover with the question with you, Brigadier Janjua. How dangerous is this particular precedent? A long list of India's state sponsorship of terrorism, not in Pakistan only, but also when we talk about the US and Canadian soil. There were a number of examples already mentioned by Dr. Jamil Khan. How do you look at the nature and the scope of this campaign?
Yeah, they are toying with a very dangerous idea by resorting to killings on American soil, on Canadian soil, in Pakistan, obviously, with impunity. And this is something very dangerous, but they are taking it from the playbook of countries like Israel, which have had no compunction in the past to go for such assassinations. We know that over half a dozen Iranian top scientists were assassinated, and we know how Qasem Soleimani was taken out in Iraq by American attack. So they have a kind of a precedent, and they try to emulate. They have big power pretensions, and since they are ally, a very valuable ally of one of the global powers, so that is why they have become emboldened. But it has no justification whatsoever, politically, morally, and legally. When we see the international law, it's a clear violation of two aspects. One is the state sovereignty, and second is the human rights. If we take the state sovereignty, it's a blatant violation of Article 2.4 of UN Charter, and it is a violation of international customary practices of international law. So that is one part, and the second part is the human rights law. India is a signatory to International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and Article 6 clearly bars any such act. So India is in clear breach of Article 6 of ICCPR and should be held liable. Though it's another matter if they have signed the relevant article of ICCPR or not. And there are other options, but Pakistan can take this issue up with the Human Rights Committee so that an investigation is ordered into this act. But for that, evidence has to be presented in a packaged form that does not give any leeway to India to present a defense. So those are the legal and state sovereignty angles. Then it is Ajit Doval doctrine that we know, that India now is sedulously following that doctrine, that bleeding Pakistan through thousand cuts, and Modi obviously displaying his muscular nationalism, is pandering to domestic political galleries, and he is encouraging such behavior. So this playbook is very dangerous. This assassination of Hamid Sarfraz as late as April 2023, and two other examples which have been highlighted by a credible American paper, Washington Post, that speaks for itself how serious the situation is. And the world should sit up and take notice of this blatant and egregious violation of international law and state sovereignty.
Right, Brigadier Janjua, I'll come back to you. Let me once again go back to Dr. Jamil Khan. Dr. Jamil Khan, please go ahead with your earlier take where you left from.
That's in fact one more point which I wanted to include at that time was that one of the cases of Gurdeep Singh, rather this Canadian, the U.S. citizen, Panam, he presented evidence in the court of law there and indicating that Modi's speech he has cited as an evidence in the court of law in the United States. And then Modi saying in his own words in a speech that we would go and take them on wherever they are. We would take them on in their hometowns, in their home places. So that is evidence cited. But we've been citing the international law, including, there are even more laws. Janjua has already cited a couple of them. I have cited a couple of them, even Geneva Convention. But all these legal framework, India is now getting away and could get free and could violate all these laws still, could not be made accountable. But there has to be some reason for it.
It's getting away so easily. Dr. Jamil Khan, why is India getting away with this so easily? Had it been only the case of Pakistan, had it been the case of any other country, we could understand that there could be a kind of not that much of an interest on the part of the Westerns. But when we talk about North American countries being the direct victims of this India state sponsorship of terrorism, how and why India can so easily get away with that?
Well, that speaks about the
available
geopolitical leverage. Now, India in this region somehow has been made to be a country which could counterbalance China, and therefore I would cite another report which is initiated by the Commission in the United States, and that is the Religious Freedom Commission. And they have cited a complete report, and that could make India accountable also. And that is the atrocities against minorities. And they've cited all the evidence. Then two more reports, which is already there with the United Nations, and that has been submitted by the United Nations Human Rights Council by no one less than their commissioner of two different times. And that is also on the record. But why it is not being brought on the agenda of the Security Council? Because the veto power country, particularly United States, would not like that to come on the agenda. And even if it comes, it is brought on the agenda, it would be vetoed. And if that point is brought on the agenda of the Security Council, then India can be really made accountable, whether it's Article 1.4 or Article 2.4 or the Geneva Convention for that matter, or Human Rights Article 19, Universal Charter. So there are so many international laws, but in much more international laws have been violated, leading to the war crime. But India is getting away from with all the violation of the international law for the main reason, which the international commentators and the analysts are also. Even I was watching a documentary of the Al Jazeera, and in that
Mr. Wani into the discussion also. let me bring in Mr. Wani into the discussion also. I'll come back to you, Dr. Jamil Khan. What I understand from this entire course of our conversation today, that it is India who is resorting to this state sponsorship of terrorism under Modi for the domestic consumption, right? And when they are going beyond their borders towards North America as well, carrying out such nefarious activities over there in Canada and North America, it is just because of the geopolitics and not the public pressure of those big democracies that they are actually giving heed to and letting India even commit what India is doing even over there. I just don't understand that India holds its domestic consumption more supreme as compared to what American authorities or the Canadians would consider as far as democratic norms, traditions, and values are concerned.
I think
the public
it was
opinion
first
over there is
the
concerned.
Canadian Prime Minister who took a bold step by exposing India's India's transnational terrorism. Well, they made assassination of Kuldeep Singh Nijjar in Canada, and thereafter we saw a very huge diplomatic row between Canada and also between India and Canada, and then United States also gave a. Indians were not expecting that such a report would come from United States, that they have found that there is all evidence available about how they were pursuing the killings of what's the name of that Sikh leader in New York. Even in
Gurpatwan Singh Pannu. Gurpatwan Singh
Pannu. And when we see that even before that, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, they also said that Indian agencies are having surveillance of the Indian Australian Sikhs over in Austria. So there was also a blow to Indian foreign diplomacy at Australia also, from Australia also. Indians know this, but why Indians go away with it is that currently they think themselves as a big market, big economy, and people are coming there and doing business with them. They take advantage of that. And as Ambassador Jamil Khan was telling you, that in the West and the United States is putting India as a parallel to China in this region. So they take advantage of that, and because of that they don't find that much of criticism from the international community. They are not being made accountable for that. In the Washington Post today's revelation, we saw one more thing. One of the professors of political science, he says the Indians and have the model of the Israelis. That's what Mossad is doing, is exactly what Mossad has been doing with the Palestinians around the globe, how they killed them, and they have picked the thread from that. Now the Indians are using the same thing against the Kashmiris, against the Sikhs, and all others around the globe. So I think the world will have to notice it, because it has now knocked the doors of the Western countries. It is not only now the Kashmiris or Pakistan or other. It is now the Canada. It is now the United States. It is now the Austria. It is now in already what Ambassador Khan was telling you in British, when the Leicester we saw, and even before that they tried to poison a Sikh leader in the Indian agencies tried to poison him, a Sikh leader in United Kingdom. So I think the West will have to rise to the occasion, leaving, if we talk about the international conventions and covenants and international regime, then they will have to abide by. They can't leave everything to the Security Council, that Security Council will act. If you believe in the UN Charter, if you believe in Geneva Conventions, if you believe in those optional protocols which the countries have adopted, and India has been signatory to that, I think India should be made accountable for that. We have seen time and again in the Human Rights Council, India's UPR, always India is being named and shamed over there, but not made accountable what India has been doing.
Right, Brigadier Janjua, one very important aspect. We saw that also in the presser of Mr. Cyrus Sajjad Qazi back earlier in 2024 regarding the financiers now. This particular report by Washington Post also talks of the funding, the payments which were funneled from dozens of informal, unregulated banking networks known as hawalas. So set up in multiple continents. Doesn't naturally this particular phenomenon invoke some sort of deliberation, the reflection, as far as money laundering for terror financing is concerned?
Yes, so SATF was pretty active in Pakistan, but what it did not take into consideration was India, which was the biggest money laundering market in the world. And it came in for a sharp focus for a while, but then it was again given a relief. India, in fact, is using these channels, and now with the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency also getting traction in the international financial market, that's another via through which these funds are channeled. Now, these intermediaries in Dubai who acted as coordinates, and they hired local criminals, some Afghan nationals in Pakistan. Imagine this network operating in Dubai through these informal channels. Who knows it is Hawala, who knows it is cryptocurrency, and maybe some other private channels. So there are so many ways and means. If you are intent on getting involved into a criminal act, violation of international law, then there are so many loopholes, and we need to plug those loopholes. And another very dangerous international law precedent is taking shape. So far, it has not attained the shape of customary practices in international law, but kind of a visage is emerging, and that is the law of preemptive action, which Americans resorted to, which Israel has been resorting to quite often. We see they have been using pages against Hezbollah. They have used artificial intelligence to generate the target lists against Gaza Palestinians. So the use of technology and use of such means to assassinate, it had some legal sanction according to international law in an armed conflict. But once between Pakistan and India, there is no armed conflict. So why this blatant act is being carried out, and what gives India such gumption to resort to these acts is perhaps a belief that they are too strong to be punished. And I believe that international law options, Human Rights Committee, Security Council, ICCPR forums, those are all legal vehicles, but our history of international law mediation and the resolution of such conflicts through these international law vehicles tells us that rarely was any such thing decided through these legal means. So perhaps direct bilateral talks, some regional political pressure, or paying back India in the same coin. These might be the leverages Pakistan might have to ultimately use to dissuade an India which is drunk on this notion of muscular Hindu nationalism, and preemption is just a curly cue to that.
Right, Brigadier Janjua, when we talk about the Financial Action Task Force, already this particular use of the payment channels, informal channels, I mean, what is the responsibility of Financial Action Task Force when we talk specifically of money laundering for terror financing?
Financial Action Task Force, as you are very well aware, it is also heavily politicized, and international geopolitics plays its part. Pakistan was hauled over the coals for long over the issue of terrorist financing, and Pakistan plugged all loopholes and came out of that. But India is one of the biggest markets for illegal transfer of funds. We know how Adani, their companies, shell companies, were found in offshore, which were acting as offshore havens for ill-gotten money, and that money was being used for all the illegal activities, including terrorism. And these were documented facts given by international press and quoted in front of SATF. So SATF, in all fairness, did call into scrutiny Indian actions. There was a whole range of checklists that India was to comply. It still hasn't complied on most of those checklist points. But why it is being given relief is because of the geopolitics.
Right, Brigadier Janjua, please stay with us. Dr. Jamil Khan, now when we talk about the role and the responsibility of Financial Action Task Force, what do you expect out of it, especially when it comes to the India being one of the leading countries as far as the illegal transfer of funds and then money laundering for terror financing in this way is concerned?
Well, theoretically speaking, FATF is meant for it, as a matter of fact, to have a check on such countries and take action like, putting them in a grey list or a blacklist. But again, what was being discussed, that India, because of its projection as a very important player of the region, because one has to understand whether it's the Security Council or FATF or OECD, most of these organizations are quite well influenced, and it becomes victim of the national politics. So therefore, you don't see any accountability. Now, FATF is no exception to it. FATF, it's meant to really check all these. Even OECD of the United Nations, they are meant to check the illegal or the money laundering, and therefore there are all these penal actions against the countries, but there is no penal action initiated against India. And there's only one course of action, whether international law, unless it is invoked, it's of no use. For example, as I was mentioning, the Chapter 6, unless you invoke Chapter 6 or Chapter 7, you cannot really implement that. Now, in the nation states, there is no higher power. The nations, they try and attain power, and they try and compete with another nation to attain higher power, so that they become the kind of a ringleader of the area, or they attain the strength that they could dictate their term. So likewise, since the United States now, because of its military might, and parallel to that, now China and Russia are coming, and that's where the competition is starting, and that's where India is attaining its significance with the hope by the Western countries and the United States that India would be able to counter that. And therefore, there are about 6 different agreements with the United States and India, including their logistic port, the seaport, Gujarat, although it's known as logistic seaport, but it's carrying out all the operations even otherwise. And their intelligence and their weapon and equipment collaboration. So if we look at all these things and their inclusion in Quads, and then separately India not included in it in the AUKUS. So if we bear all these things in our mind, all these collaborations in our mind, we can very conveniently draw the conclusion that why the accountability is not being initiated, whether through the FATF or through the OECD or through the United Nations. And that is the main reason which we have deliberated, because it's not only us discussing this in this debate, but it's also being debated and discussed in various think tanks and in various documentaries and TV talk shows elsewhere, not only in Pakistan.
Let's talk about last question from you. I'll go with the same question with the other participants as well. It's a matter of generations, Pakistan and India. It is the extremist ideology led by Bharatiya Janata Party, that Hindutva ideology, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the flag bearer of which he is. What sort of impact in the longer run do you foresee, especially when Pakistan, no matter whatever the authorities here are always desirous of friendly and peaceful neighborly relations with India on the basis of mutual respect? What impact do you see of such sinister campaigns?
These sinister campaigns which India is doing, and the way the polarization in Indian public at this time, and the rise of this extremist ideology in India, the way they came to the power, the way they condone each and every act of terrorism, be it outside, be it inside India, the way they condone it, I could see that India is going to face the consequences of this. We experienced it, and we know it, that it is going to pay. We saw Currently, the younger generation of India did not align with the BJP's program in these elections. That's why BJP was bad, because unemployment rate is rising in India. That everything in India cannot be that you will talk against Islam, you will talk against Pakistan, or you will talk against Kashmiris. That is not going to do it. And on these lines, when India is divided, then India will have to face the consequences of this.
Right. Brigadier Janjua, what sort of implications are there for the bilateral relationship between Pakistan and India when India continuously resorts to such type of dangerous activities, given the fact Pakistani authorities have always been desirous of peaceful neighborly relations with India? How is it going to affect the coming generations?
You know, at the moment it is very saturnine scenario because the BJP government under Modi is perhaps pandering to the extremist ideology, and it thinks it can win elections. So brownie points are won. As long as they feel that way, they would continue with that same strategy. Yes, hope in the new generation is there because there's a new coalition, INDIA, which is led by Mr. Gandhi, and he's a young, he appeals to the young generation, and this hate narrative cannot provide you the economic public goods which the people of India are hankering after. And after a while, once people themselves understand the hollowness of and self-defeating nature of this policy, which is based on hatred, and a political change is effected in India, only then there would be a possibility of a better future in relations between the two countries. So at the moment, it is all muscular nationalism and Hindutva bigotry.
I get your point. Very quickly, Dr. Jamil Khan, your closing comments. Are you hopeful of the newer generation in India, or especially when we talk of the Congress leader, Mr. Gandhi, as Brigadier Janjua has talked of? Do you see any hope that the kind of narrative, this hate narrative, to a depth at which it has been infiltrated under Bharatiya Janata Party, the newer generation or Mr. Gandhi, would he be able to undo that? Is it going to be an easy task?
Well, that is what is expected, because the voters and supporters of the Congress, they understand it, and there are a lot of papers published within Indian society, and they say that, if they want to attain a double-digit progress, which they are trying to, they cannot do it with such a high degree of polarization and such a high degree of hate narration. So this atmosphere is not congenial for their dreams. If they want to realize their dream, the Congress at least realized it quite well, that they have to really have a better relations, because the bilateral relation, Pakistan is not an easy country, and Pakistan is not that big that India could, think of prevailing upon it. So therefore, they definitely realize it, and it's in the better future for the younger generation of both the countries that they improve their bilateral relation, and particularly in the presence of the SCO, ECO, where this part, the West, the entire economy is moving from West to East. The entire tilt is moving from West to East, and India does realize that, and that's why they are in the SCO, and that's why they are also trying to have the best of the best benefits from the East and the best of the best benefits from the West. But it cannot go on for an indefinite period in an environment which India has today. What we have discussed, the hate environment, the hate atmosphere, it is going to implode from within, because there are so many fault lines which has already been discussed, deliberated, reported, and there are a lot of dissensions in India. And if India does not
go on for long, and we hope that this sanity prevails among the ranks of the leadership, especially over there in India of Bharatiya Janata Party. Dr. Jamil Khan, former ambassador, joining us on Skype. Thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Brigadier retired Rashid Wali Janjua, senior analyst, joining us on the phone line. Thank you very much for your time. Mr. Altaf Wani, Indian affairs expert, joining us in the studio. Mr. Wani, thank you very much for your time. Also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.